Welcome to Global Math Department. My name is Rana Hafiz and I'll be your host tonight. Tonight we are going to hear from Farica Erwin about standards-based grading. Would everyone please introduce themselves in the chat window, telling us what you teach, where and what your Twitter handle is if you have one. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to explain how these meetings work. These meetings are recorded and are available within 24 hours after the meeting ends. To view the recording, you can use the same link you used to get here tonight. The global math community prides itself on being friendly and supportive. The chat room is available for topical and general conversation throughout the meeting. I'll be sure to catch your questions for the presenter to be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our speaker tonight is Farica Erwin, and I'm going to let you take it from here, Farica.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully we can hear me. My mic is on. I am so happy to see all of you here. I had a dream that nobody showed up to this, and then Lee made me record it anyway with nobody in the chat. So I am happy to see you all here. I am Farica Erwin. I am currently located in Virginia, where I am teaching at an independent private school that is pre-K through 12 grade. I've been teaching for 20 years. This is my 20th year. Almost all of them I have taught algebra of some sort. I have taught a bunch of other classes, but algebra is my main focus. So this really is going to be about my journey. So there's, I apologize. There's going to be a lot of talking about me, but really it's my favorite topic. So, we can move on with that. So 2 weeks ago, as I was training myself to stay awake for this time, because the time is 9 o'clock my time, and I normally watch these recorded videos because I really can't stay up this late. But I've been training myself. So for the past 2 weeks, I have attended the live sessions. And John Rowe 2 weeks ago started with his beliefs. And I was like, man, that's exactly what how my journey started, was these beliefs that drove me to where I am today, and my philosophies of teaching and how I incorporate all of that. In my pre-Twitter days, 20 years ago, I had all of these thoughts about teaching, and specifically math teaching and how it could be. But I really had no real idea on how to implement that or to change it. I was in a very large public Texas school. Sorry, that came out weird. In a large public school in Texas. There we go. I was teaching. I was writing curriculum. I was training teachers, kind of all in the hope of getting these beliefs out there, set in this kind of traditional, all the curriculum is given to you in a district where you're supposed to be on the same page as everybody else in the district, kind of thing. And I eventually even moved to be I left the classroom and was a 6 through 12 curriculum coordinator for a district, to try to help move these along and get my beliefs in place. So my first belief was that, grades really mean nothing and they're arbitrary, and they don't tell the kids anything, and they don't tell the teacher anything. So a student who comes to me with an 85, let's say, in class, or the grade before, doesn't really give me any insight into what type of student they are. What does the 85 mean? Did they master 85% of the skills? What if they mastered every skill just at an 85% level? Did they only complete 85% of the work? So I ask my students now, every year at the beginning of the year, I ask them to think about their grade. I don't want them to share it. They all want to start yelling out their grades, but I don't ask them to share it. And I want them to think about what it means to them, what it means to me, as their new teacher. What is that grade going to tell me? Does it tell me what kind of student they are? Does it tell me how hard they worked or how little they worked? How many tasks they completed or how they worked with their group? It doesn't really explain even how well they did on assessments. So, and it also doesn't tell me what skills they've mastered. I really don't have any clue about what they know with that grade. So, I really want them to come out with something. So my next belief is that, or this led to belief number 2, in where I really want my students to know their strengths and weaknesses. I want them to, at the end of the course, be able to say things like, wow, I'm really good at blank, but I still kind of need help on this. Just because you have weaknesses doesn't mean that they don't move on to the next level. They all think they have to master every single thing to pass my class and to go to geometry. But, the ideas of those weaknesses are just something that, you have to continue working on. Our classes, if we're really focused on this vertical alignment, should really flow into one another. And what they learn in my algebra class really doesn't stop. They should continue and be reviewing and working on it and building on it in geometry and algebra 2 and pre-cal. And that just because they took a test in my class, they're not done with it. So it's unreasonable for these kids to think that they have to have mastered every single skill. Nobody is like that. So in reality, they probably have some skills they do astonishingly well on, and some that are, they really fail. And maybe they fail it a couple of times. They just never truly get it because we haven't had that set-in time for them to really understand what that's about. And we all have that balance. Even we as math teachers, we know even, which lessons are our weakness and which lessons are our strongest, the things that we've really developed over the years, and the things every year we go, man, I really need to redo that lesson, or I really need to try something different because it wasn't working. And as adults, we just tend to recognize that those differences. We know that those are our weaknesses, and we deal with it and we work through it. It's not anything that doesn't hinder us or keep us from moving on. So I really just think that they need some way to know where they're at so they can get guidance on the next skills. So, excuse me. So last, I believe that math is more than just memorizing steps. I think historically, and I mean that I was thinking about this 20 years ago, that we kind of inadvertently trained our students to have bad habits. So when I'm getting them in algebra in the 9th grade, they had about 8 years of math that have given them habits, or bad habits, where they are really just waiting for answers or waiting for a teacher to basically come save them, show them how to do it, a lot of, they sit and learn a skill, they copy the skill from the board, they do the skill in their, in their homework, they practice the skill, and then they regurgitate the skill back on the test. And while there's something to be said for repetitiveness of a skill, I think the multitudes of them having done that, they come into your class just expecting you to be the same way. So it was a hard concept to kind of start to change in my class when you feel like you're the only one. Now, I don't really believe that now, now that I've been on Twitter and met teachers, and this whole change idea of where that we are trying to get them to think and work through problems, and we have these ideas of notice, wonder, and trying to get them to initiate something. So we all still have that problem, and I think they were trained wrong, and not that anybody was doing it purposely. I think it has led to that, where they think, I'm learning this new skill, I repeat this new skill, and I give it back to you. And I truly believe in my spot in algebra, I was sitting at a place where I really wanted them to take everything they have ever learned ever and apply it to the new situations. They have these inherent math abilities that has kind of just been drained out of them by this repetition of the type that they do. And so I more recently have run into this poster that was created by Greta Bergman, and about Sarah Vanderwerf's blog post about what is math. And I do have this posted in my classroom because I think it sums up that idea nicely, that really it's about the patterns and trying to figure out what's going on. And to me, all algebra is that main part down there of the generalizing patterns. That's where we get things like writing equations and graphing. We don't want to make a graph of 1,000,000 points when we can have an equation that will kind of get us there quicker. So that this idea sums up belief, and I love this poster. And at the end, there's a link to where you guys can get your own copy of this, and then all these links will work so that you can have your own copy and see what those were. Sorry, I clicked that a lot of times. Okay, so here's an example of a problem where I was trying to get them there. And this was kind of before I really started standards-based grading, and how I was thinking, I was trying to take all these ideas and how can I apply this in my class? And this is a problem that I put on my Unit 1 assessment. It's a system problem, except I have not taught systems. So it goes in Unit 1, where we were talking about equations and just solving. We review that from previous year, but I just added on like literal equations, and I think in this unit is absolute value equations. But really, I'm looking at what can they do with this problem. I do not teach from a textbook. I don't have a textbook for my class. So my students also don't get those problems in a textbook that lead them through. Like this one in a textbook would normally say, the moving company charges blah, blah, blah. Another moving company charges blah, blah, blah. Write an equation and solve for how much it would be the same. And so they're not led through what to do. So I put it on there just to see. And I'd like to know if you did not know about systems, or whatever grade level you're, how would you go about solving something like this? Because I can tell you maybe 5 kids in all of my students. Right? None of them use equations to solve this one. Oh, Lee, yes, that's yep, you guys got it. That's tables of values for sure. Yes. And almost all of my kids make a table. Now, I'll tell you that the answer to this is 16. So it takes them a while. The answer used to be 23, and I realized they spend way too much time because they are making this table of 23 values, a 2-column table, right, of 23 values. So I changed it a little, and now it's at 16. But I wanted it to be enough that they realized that it was kind of a waste of their time, but not too much that they didn't get discouraged, that they actually got an answer. And yes, almost all of them create a table. And I get these lists, and a couple of them you can see where they added, 20 instead of 21 because they got on a roll and they messed up somewhere. So of course their answer doesn't come out correctly, but you can see that their process was correct. And so we have a discussion the next day about it, is that, I should, I should make it 16.5 hours, except that I don't want them to be discouraged. I want them to see the answer. I want them to see the fruit of their labor in this, because I want them to know that they know how to do these problems already. I did not have to teach them anything. It's completely a system of equations that, come a couple units later, we'll write a system and they can solve it that way. But the idea is that the algebra really just makes all of this quicker. So it's not, faster isn't smarter. Is that Kathy Seeley, right? Faster isn't smarter. But it's not a race. I don't want somebody to finish their test first. But the idea that mathematics kind of came about from, I'm kind of repetitively doing this same thing all the time. Isn't there a way I can simplify or shortcut that? And we do the same thing. They teach addition first, and then you go, hey, look, repeated addition is really multiplication. And then we've got new rules for that. So I want them to know that almost like 90% of algebra, they already know how to do. They have all the skills. They've been in training their whole life, and they know it. And I don't want them to lose that inherent math ability that they have. So, excuse me. So, I was still looking. I couldn't figure out how to do this in the district is giving the curriculum, and we all have to be on the same page. And full disclosure, I was part of that writing team. I mean, I was like, I'll help write curriculum. I will train teachers. I will train them on this, but I still couldn't get what I really wanted in my classes from what I believed in there. And then in 2009-ish, I went to a Marilyn Burns training of about teaching mathematics. It was offered in my district for kinder through 6th grade teachers. And I asked, if they're bringing in somebody, can I go? And I was a high school teacher, and they let me go. Me and one other high school teacher went. She was my co-teacher in geometry at the time. And there was a couple 8th grade teachers, but I was 1 year in this district. But I knew that when I was attending conferences all these years, that I really wasn't getting anything from the high school sections, but man, did I pick up stuff from the elementary sessions. I have learned so much from elementary conferences and sessions and teachers that I apply every day in my high school math classes. It's how I learned how to use manipulatives. Nobody in high school teaches you how to use manipulatives. So I was learning these games and manipulatives and ideas and how to bring these concepts up. So when they offered this, I was like, please, please, please. And let me tell you, it was the best. I still to this day use stuff from this conference. I have the book I use constantly. I have an entire probability stations rotations unit that I do that's like 90% from this book. Best conference ever. But part of her book, she's got these guidelines that are part of the problem solving and the things that they're doing in the book. And it's the confidence to try various strategies, a willingness to risk being wrong at times, the ability to accept the frustrations that come from not knowing. This we call in my class the productive struggle, right? Honor the struggle. We want to see that. It's good. A willingness to persevere when solutions are not immediate. This one we are still working on. I still am not very good at training my kids to persevere. It's getting better, but it's that idea of the minute they get something wrong, they're like, just show me how to do it. I'm trying to tell them there's, in algebra, there's like 50 million ways. I can't just show you a way and kind of, pigeonhole you into this one way of thinking. And then the understanding for the difference between not knowing an answer and not having found it yet. And that helps with the perseverance and do that. So I have since stepped up doing warm-ups that are more like, I do notice and wonders and which one doesn't belong types of ones. I like to do puzzles. Anything that some of the Solve Me mobiles are okay. But puzzles, really the kids are very good about trying different things and working through. And I'm hoping that the more we do that, they'll start to apply that to math class. If we start our day puzzling through something, that it seems okay to do it in class. So I clearly immediately adopted all of these guidelines for my class. You'll see at the top, it was on my syllabus. My course is going to do this. I wasn't always successful, but it's on my syllabus. So then I really had to work to getting it where I needed to be. I also have these hanging on my wall, and if I was to have a mantra for my class, this would be it. I wholeheartedly believe that it's all about making mistakes. And I don't allow my kids to really just yell out correct answers. And if I know a kid has a correct answer, I will purposely not call on them. And I talk about in class, I have those, was it Tracy's book that does the mathematicians, right? The mathematicians take risks, mathematicians persevere or work through problems. Mathematicians work in groups, mathematicians work alone, mathematicians prove, all of those. And I have those hanging in my room also. And I very specifically walk around and I ask them, I said, do any of them say mathematicians get right answers? Because nothing in anything I have posted in my room says anything about mathematicians get right answers. Because we don't. But I think they're so used to always seeing yes, it is becoming the math teacher. They're so used to seeing, we get up there and show them a problem that as a teacher, you're always doing it correctly. And I try to explain, I've been teaching algebra for 20 years. If they took the same course for 20 years, they'd be really good at it too. And probably wouldn't need to work through or struggle through a problem. But when I leave teaching calculus for about 10 years and came back to it and to teach it, it's, that's a good one. Mathematicians do not memorize it. We come back to this, this struggle. My calculus, when I go back to it, I can work through, and I can work through with the kids and show them. And unfortunately, they're like seniors at this point. So it's the first time they see a teacher actively working through a problem where we try stuff and it doesn't work. And I've tried to incorporate that into my algebra class. It's really hard when you have this goal and this guideline, and you're trying to get through, and half the kids already know the answer, so it's hard to let them struggle out loud. But also, I was having a really hard time getting my kids to believe that I truly believed this, and my grading system didn't match it at all. Because you're grading homework and you're grading classwork, and you grade their activity and grade their quiz and you grade their test, and everything is a grade, which I could see why they were scared to fail. I mean, so it was either I'm just not going to try because I know I don't know it. What's the difference? So everything I was doing was kind of counterintuitive to these things I truly, truly believed. So I did, in the summer of 2013. Ooh, that slide is wrong. I really apologize to Sean and to Dane because that's wrong. It will be correct on the one that you get a copy of. But I researched in the summer of 2013. I was given an applied calculus class, and I had to find activities for calculus. I could do activities for algebra all day long, but calculus needed to find. So I found Sean Cornely's blog, and his blog is actually the Think, Think, Thunk blog, which I think is no longer active because he started a company outside of that. But the Think, Think, Thunk blog, he not only was doing interactive, basically application calculus, but he kind of started initial standard-based grading. He's the first place I heard of this. And he was making his own grade books and giving them out to like teachers for free so that you could incorporate this idea of standard-based grading and not need your other grade book. I unfortunately didn't have the choice to use my own grade book. So I was still on a journey to find what would work better. The When Math Happens blog is actually Dane Ehlert. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's Ehlert. So somewhere something got erased in between there. So Dane has a nice site, and When Math Happens, he's got an entire standard-based grading website dedicated to resources for it. I highly suggest you check it out. And Dan Meyer's blog also brought me to standards-based grading and how to do and kind of like problem-based, where you start each unit with like a problem that they're thinking through and working through, and then you bring in the math to help them identify those things. Modified later was Anna Vance's blog, Type A Mathland. That was not in the summer of 2003. That was a couple of years later when I was a little more into Twitter. But her ideas of standard-based grading match mine. It's more aligned with how I do now. So all of those are linked for later. But the discovery of standards-based grading was the answer to everything. It was a way that I could take all of these ideas and the idea of allowing for failure and mistakes and being able to do things over. And with standard-based grading, that doesn't really affect their grade. So how I implemented it. So, the first go round was, it was okay. Not so great, but it was okay. The first thing I did was I needed some standards. I had now been in a private school that didn't have standards. I'm the only algebra teacher, so I could make up whatever I want. And yes, while I'm aligned with the rest, we also have a lot of mobility. And I came from Texas. I knew Texas standards. I taught Texas standards. I went to committees where they talked about the standards. I knew those. Okay. Then I came to Virginia and had to learn the Virginia SOLs. And at the private school, we don't have to use them, but we like to make sure that we're covering them, because if we're a pre-K through 12 school, we sometimes have a lot of mobility between the middle school and the high school. Either kids leave us to go to public high school and they need to be ready, or they have come up through middle school and come to us in high school and have been learning either Common Core or SOLs. Unfortunately, both Texas and Virginia were non-Common Core places. So I had to kind of incorporate all of those standards to make sure all my bases were covered. And what I knew historically, I mean, I knew Texas stuff. So I kind of meshed Texas and Virginia and Common Core into my skills checklist. So my skills checklist started off with a lot of skills. Again, when you get the link, you could click on this page and it will give you a copy of my skills checklist if you would like to see the whole thing. But I had a lot and it was kind of hard to manage. And it was hard to figure out where things should be placed. Now it's down to 30. I can fit them all on one page. I have 30, and then my 13 units is a checklist. So now I have it in a way that my students can have a piece of paper. And after every assessment, they could monitor how they're doing. And at the end of the year, they should know, that's the belief too, right? What is my strength and what is my weakness? I want them to have, something to back up their claims of what they know and what they don't know, or what they know and what they need to continue working on. So I also wanted them to read a little better than curriculum normally, or standards normally read. Because we don't use a book and we are a one-to-one school, they can Google everything. I mean, they can find resources. So I wanted the words to be something that they could read and understand, and that they could Google them and it would lead them pretty close to the right spot, that they didn't have to edit what they were looking at, or that they would get some crazy Algebra 2 pre-cal level when we were only Algebra 1. So the way that I shortened all of my skills is, you'll see that there are some of them here that are pretty ambiguous. Number 1 is represent quantitative situations algebraically. I added the word quantitative in there. It's really just appeasement for our testing. We were pretty weak in our quantitative, quantitative mathematics, which to me was really just comparison of things. So whether they're equal to each other and we're writing equations, or we're writing inequalities where things are greater than or less than, or we're comparing charts or anything like that. So this one topic, I put everything in. If they ever have to write an equation or write something down, take from words and make it algebra, it goes in this. So I test this skill almost every single unit, because as we move through the different functions, you do that with every function. So it's not specific to any one thing. I also have some, like number 9, analyze data. that fits a lot of stuff. This is where I can throw in questions about like whether it's a function or not. Those kinds of quick, where's the max, where's the min, where's it increasing, where's it decreasing, when did the rocket hit the ground, kind of, where's the zero kind of questions, analyzing data. It fits a lot of things. But also, we have things that are really strictly new to algebra, and that's the first time they get that kind of skill, like the domain and range, right? Number 12. So it's the first time we start talking about domain and range. I want that skill to be specific and separate. So that's where I started. And then I started labeling everything I did with a skill number. So if I couldn't find a skill number to fit what I was doing, I didn't do it. Because if this was where my kids were going and what the basis of my algebra class was, then all of those problems that didn't fit this didn't need to be there. So I edited all my quizzes and tests. Every time I gave something, it was, can I put a skill number on there? And if I could, it was probably a legit question. But if I couldn't, it was pointless. It was like that one, challenge question in the textbook or something. So it got rid of all of those. So I started being able to really streamline my quizzes and tests. And I'll show you what that looks like on my quizzes and tests also. So here's a portion of my test in which you'll see up at the top, I have TS, and this one is 4.14. So it's tested skill, because my quizzes are quiz. So it's tested skill, unit 4, skill 14. So it matches that checklist. And then I do write it out for them so that they know. So I have that. The bottom, you'll notice I had to put 4.01. I used 2 digits for all of them, because if I just put 4.1, which I started with, and it did not work out, when I got to 410, the kids were confused because 4.1 and 4.10 were the same number to them. But to me, I was reading it as not as a number decimal, but as a, this is test number, skill number. So I changed it so that it would be a little more obvious in that aspect. I think if I had to do it all over again, and I could probably still change it, I might use a dash there instead of a decimal. It's just the decimal was easier in the grade book than a dash. So, and I list them in my grade book like this: TS 414, TS 401, all like that. So you can see the whole skill for the graphing linear functions. If you notice, there's basic problems there, because I need to know, do you just know the basics? Can you get by on this skill? And then there's usually one application problem or a new problem in a way they hadn't seen before. And I'll explain why in a minute there. But those problems tend to come from SAT and ACT type practice tests. I have a book of SAT practice, ACT practice. I have the old SAT book or PSAT books that come out, and they're done. And I just look for problems that are related to that skill. So I put one of those on the test. They always end up on tests, not on quizzes. And I know it goes against my original belief of you should never test them on something they haven't seen, except the concept they've seen. I want to see, can they apply it to the next level? So my tests are always cumulative. My tests usually have about 4 or 5 skills on them, and they get a grade for each skill. So if there's 5 skills, they'll get 5 grades in the grade book, 1 for each skill. My quizzes happen about every 3 days. I usually get 2 or 3 in a unit. They are only 1 skill, 2 max if they kind of overlap each other. So my quizzes are really only like 3 to 5 questions long. I'm just checking at basic level. So my quiz would contain something like 5, 6, and 7, but not 8. It's just the basis. Do we know what we're talking about on a quiz? So we access it like that. And then I explain my scale. So with standards-based grading, you really can't grade the way that you are used to. It's not a 100-point scale. I'm not taking points away or adding points. I'm not looking for all those little bits and pieces. I'm looking holistically at what they're doing. I want to look at the whole thing and say, do you know what you're doing? Have you shown me enough to prove that you know this skill, or do you need more? And so I started looking at, how can I show that? Well, I had taught AP Calculus, and I really liked the idea of their rubric, where they grade their free response questions on a scale, right? You get 0 to 5 points based on, how much or what you show. And sometimes there's very specific things they're looking for, like you have to say this or name this in order to get your points. And mine are kind of like that. I have an extension problem. So I went with that aspect. So I searched the web again, and Sarah's blog, Everybody is a Genius, had this. It's a beautiful 5-point scale. It includes a 3+, which helped my purposes, or helped me for my purpose. So I, applied this idea. So on mine, though, you'll notice, and I think I got the words from hers. She had it written like this. Somebody color coded it. It's not on her file color coded. I found that somewhere else. I cannot find the who it was. The original creator, while I have a copy of it, didn't put their name in the creation part of it, and I cannot find it anywhere on the web. But I think it's a genius how it's color coded. So I leave it that way for my students. So I tell them that, the basic, I can do the basics of this skill, meaning I have done just enough to pass this class, is the level 3, right? That's the basis of like passing AP classes, like a 3 is passing. So a 3. And then I look at, and I really do say these words in my head when I'm grading their paper. So I look at the section holistically. I look at the whole thing. And the first thing I determine is, did they show me enough to show me the basic skill? Do they know what they're doing, or are they not? And if they're not, then they're somewhere in the red. And then I decide whether they've done some good things, like some real mathy things to get the 2, even though they're not quite at the skill, at the level I need them to be at. And then the 1, the most important words of this is, I tried. So as long as they tried a valid mathematical attempt, it could be nothing related to what we're doing, but if it's a valid mathematical attempt, then I give them the 1. If they leave it blank, I tell them, sorry, it's blank. It's the 0. It's the invisible number on the scale there. I can't give you anything, but I give them the 1. And then I look at, on the other side, if they did show mastery, where can I put them at? So, if if they just need to be a little more careful with it, they made a couple mistakes, things like that, the 3+, nearly perfectly, tell my kids, these are the ones like, let's say it was solving equations. You solve 3 equations, they all look great, except the second equation, the answer was supposed to be -2, you had +2, and it's because you made a sign error somewhere in your problem. It's that one little pesky error. That's the nearly perfect. It's not anything that really keeps you from understanding the thing, but you're not perfect. So I, have that scale, and it's that, and the be more careful would probably be more like, let's say on every single problem, instead of doing the addition subtraction step first, they were multiplying or dividing first, and they weren't dividing by everything on each side. So they were missing some things, but they were still working out and getting things correct, or not correct just because they were flipping that, but they did it on every single problem. So if you fix that one error, right, that one mistake, their whole quiz is better. And I tell them that that's like bulk discount grading, right? You did the exact same thing on everything. In traditional grading, you'd be marking points off of every single problem. To me, it's just, you need to be more careful. There's one thing wrong here, really, conceptually, one thing wrong. And that gets you at the 3+ level. The 5, I point out, does not say that you were perfect. It does not mean you got every single thing correct on there. This is where I can solve unfamiliar problems on this. So I don't give them the 5 unless they can do this number 8 problem also. They can do 5, 6, and 7 and get a 4 because it's all correct, but didn't get 8 because it's the new application problem. But they only get the 5 if they do 8 and the other things. They have to be able to do the application, the unfamiliar, the extra, right? To be able to take what they learn and apply it in a new situation. So this scale honestly makes grading so much faster. I mark, or I usually a highlighter or a colored pen, and I just mark on their paper where things went wrong. And then I just look at it holistically. I keep a scale of this over there, and then I have it up there, and I look at it every time I grade. So I tell them that that's what these scores mean. However, my grade book doesn't know this, right? My grade book doesn't know this scale. And unfortunately, my grade book is a school, right? Like the grade book you have to use for the school. So if I entered a 3 out of 5 in my grade book, it would convert it to a 60. But a 60 on our scale is failing, right? 60 out of 100 on our, A's are in the 90s, B's are in the 80s, C's are in the, 70s, D's are in the 60s. Our D ends at 63. So anything below a 63 is an F. So a 3 out of 5 would give them an F, when I've been trying to instill in them that the 3 is mastery, right? So I have to trick my grade book into doing what I want. So since the C level is mastery, C level is where everything begins, when they get a 3, I enter a 75. And actually, I don't even do out of 100. I do 7.5 out of 10. I do everything out of 10 because it's just easier. But I enter a 7.5. That does not mean they earned a 75 on their quiz or whatever, because I really want them to get out of that thinking. I did not, they always come to me, where'd you take points off? I'm like, I don't take points off. I don't give points. I don't take points away. I look holistically at, can you do it or not? So they see the numbers on their test and quiz, even though the grades are what go in my grade book. So when parents pull up a progress report, they see the numbers. They see the 100, 95, 85, 75. They don't see the other thing. So I trick my grade book. However, this still kind of matches my my belief anyway. You're looking at, there's one failing grade on the regular scale of things, right? There's all that discussion about the gap from 0 to 63 being way more Fs than possible passing grades, right? There's 63 Fs, which only leaves 37 grades, right? Valid grades. So it's not proportional anyway. So a long time ago, I stopped giving anything below a 50 anyway. So even if I showed a 0 on their paper, they got a 50 in the grade book. And I've been doing that for years. It was one of the ways I could kind of counteract those beliefs that I couldn't figure out how to do. So this drives this idea, and they do get used to it. They start to do it. And honestly, if I have any arguments in the beginning of the year, I say, okay, let me grade it traditionally. Because when I have only 5 questions on a quiz and they miss all 3 because they did one problem wrong, like one concept wrong, and they were sitting at a 3 or a 3+, but I grade it in the traditional way, it is always lower. Always. So the minute they argue and I say, fine, I'll grade your stuff traditionally, they immediately change their minds and never argue again. So I haven't really had a problem with that, because they do see that it is for the best for them. So in this, the idea of them being able to learn from their mistakes, right? And to make these things, that you should be able to try again and do over. I allow retakes for anything that's in the red, meaning a 2 or a 1. And my retakes are skill-based. They look just like my quizzes. So if they wanted to come in and retake skill 14, they would only get a little half sheet of paper with skill 14 on it. And I only do the basic level. So the highest they get in mine is a 3, because this is where I got the most pushback. We're in a pre-K through 12 independent private school, college bound, everybody's, GPA matters. And of course, everybody's an A student. So when I was allowing anybody to retake, I was getting the kids who were getting 4s trying to come in and get a 5. And I'm like, that's not really how it worked, because in my system, my 5 was you can apply it. But they were going home and getting tutoring and then wanted to come in and do kind of like the same type of problem. And that's not how it worked. So I stopped that and just said, you know what? Really, all I care about is you making it through my class. So I allow anything below to get a retake up to a 3, and I will completely replace their grade at that 3 level. And so they can retake as many times as they need to, just that skill for the 3 level. And what that did was it reduced the amount of kids coming in to do retakes in the first place. So that was better on me. But I really just keep a stack of extra problems that relate to that subject, that skill. And they come in and say, Miss, I need to retake skill 14. And I go, great, I have one right here. It takes them about 5-10 minutes because it's just the basics of the skill. And I go, yep, you know it, or nope, you don't. They really kind of have to almost make 100 on it because it's only the basic skill, but it's 3 problems. So they're just showing that they have it now. And that has been a lifesaver. Just having those. And now that I've done it for a couple of years, I kind of have a bank of these little half sheet quizzes. So I don't need to to worry about that. They come in, I have one ready, and it doesn't matter when they come in and do that. So this led me to stop grading homework. I don't grade homework. I believe on this scale that my quizzes and tests truly tell me, what they know and what they don't know. So I only grade assessments. I provide practice every night. It's digital, usually something like Delta Math, where they can keep doing as many problems as they want, or Math Bits worksheets, or things where they can gain, see how problems are worked through. And I tell them it's for them. If they do 3 problems and everything's great, then they're fine. But if they do 3 problems and they're not doing well, then they know they need to come get help. They don't need to do a worksheet of 10 problems to show me. And I know that they've been practicing because I grade their assessments. I know based on their quiz or their test that they've been doing those aspects. So my tests end up being about double the amount of quizzes. So in a single unit, I do about 2 to 3 quizzes. So that's 2 to 3 skills. And on my tests, I test like 4 to 6 skills. So they get 4 to 6 grades for every test put in there, and 2 or 3 grades for each quiz put in there. So in a unit, they will have at least 2 grades, 2 grades for each skill. Somebody was asking about earning the 4 to a 5. All of my tests are cumulative also. So just because unit 1 test they didn't do so well, maybe they made a 3 or a 3+, they certainly have that opportunity when it pops back up again on another test to increase it to that. But otherwise, in my case, it was turning into a case of grade grubbing again, where they were really just looking at the difference between a 95 and 100 in the grade book. I was like, no, it's about the level. So they did that. So I provide practice. I stopped grading all of that. And then here's been my results. So 3 years ago, my class average was an 81. And I had 7 out of 61 total. And this was only algebra classes, so I only looked at that. 7 out of 61 who had to repeat. And this was when I was still grading homework. So I was grading homework. They, of course, had all the answers. I was really just checking to see if they did it. It was completion. And so I still had 7 had to repeat the course. And I felt bad because there was 2 of them there. And I put the D's and C's in there because we have a rule that if they're in 8th grade, most of our 8th graders take algebra, but they have to make at least a C or higher to get the credit, because we don't want them entering high school struggling already. So we make them retake it for a better grade come their 9th grade year. So we had, I had this amount. So I stopped grading homework because I figured if they're, if they can master the tests, then they can master the tests. That's the whole point, right? If you master all the concepts, then you should move on to the next course. I'm not the gatekeeper because you don't like to do homework. So the next year, when I eliminated homework, I still use standard-based grading though. So I stopped the homework, 5 points every day kind of thing. And I had 8 out of 68 students. So about the same percentage. But you'll notice my F's moved up to the D area. I did have more students, but my average was higher. So that was good. But then this last year, once I really got the hang of it, it really dropped. I only had 4 out of 70 who needed to repeat the course. And one of them left the school because that F, it was the same F. Both times it was the same kid. So he had already repeated the course. So I'm hoping this year is better. I don't know if I can do better than 5% retention in there. But it's really, really brought that up. And now that I'm no longer grading homework, it's a time saver like crazy. I have so much more time for warm-ups that I don't have to go over homework anymore. And I think that's, yes, 10 o'clock exactly. So you can find me, you see the copy of the presentation as there's a bit.ly.com/move to SBG, and you can have your own copy of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Farica, for being with us tonight. Our next Tuesday, we'll be talking about ELL strategies in a high school math classroom, and we will be you'll get all the information for the presentation. Our presenters would be Jennifer Thomas and Carrie Ferguson. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending the webinar today.